called me a simple girl. He said I wasn't suitable for his high circle. I listened, stayed silent, and watched him play the role of a successful man in front of his friends. But everything changed that night when I accidentally ended up at the same restaurant where he was celebrating success. He introduced me to the waitress as the neighbor who keeps hitting on him. His friends laughed, and I just smiled and left them with a bill that made his face go white. They didn't know that I was the one who owned that restaurant chain, and that this ordinary girl had more power than all of them combined. When he came to apologize, crying, I just said, "You wanted to date someone special. Look who's ordinary now. My name is Anna. If you saw me now in a simple white shirt, my hair pulled back in a ponytail, holding a cup of cheap coffee, you'd never guess that I was once featured in business magazines as the young heiress of the Stanton Group." Yes, at 27, I had everything: a house overlooking the ocean, a car collection, a name that opened any door. But with each passing day, that everything became an empty sound to me. Everyone who approached me wanted something: a contact, a connection, money, status. No one saw just me. After my father's death, I took over the company, and that's when I first felt how people start talking to you not because of who you are, but because of what you can give. I dreamed of something else, of authenticity. Of a person who would love me not for my last name, not for my bank account, but because I laugh when I spill coffee and sing 2,000 songs in the shower. One day, I simply disappeared. Without warning, without security, without brands. I rented a small apartment on the outskirts, got a job at a flower shop under a different name, Anna Rivers. I wore jeans, sneakers, simple dresses from a thrift store, and for the first time in a long while, I could breathe freely. People didn't pay attention to me, and it was wonderful. I was no longer Anna Stanton, the heiress. I was just Anna, the girl who wakes up at 7, waters the plants, and goes to work. It was then, amidst the scent of lilies and coffee beans, that I met him, Sam. And at the time, I thought this would finally be a story not about money, not about status, but about love. I met Sam by chance, as it always happens when you're not expecting it. It was a regular rainy day. I was standing by the coffee machine in our flower shop, trying to get it started after yet another technical crisis. Water spilled onto the floor, and I sighed, grabbing some napkins to wipe it up. "Looks like this coffee machine needs a vacation too," a joking voice sounded from behind me. I looked up. Standing before me was a tall guy in a sports jacket with that easy smile that seemed to say, "I know how to make you laugh, even if you're having a tough day." He introduced himself, Sam, a trainer at the nearby gym. He asked for a coffee for himself and another one for the girl who's battling the machinery today. We started talking. He was lighthearted, cheerful, simple. He talked about how he didn't like all those glamorous girls because they always fuss over their brands and filters. I laughed, ironically, almost relieved. He had no idea how close he was to the truth. We started dating casually. Coffee after his workout, walks in the park, dinners at home with pizza delivery. He praised me for being real, unpretentious, just right. And I liked it. I told him I worked at a flower shop, lived alone, loved silence and old songs. He listened intently, joked that I looked like a character from Gilmore Girls, and called me sunshine. In his presence, the world seemed peaceful. But sometimes, when he spoke about people with money, there was a subtle hint of contempt in his voice. "All these businessmen, heirs, spoiled brats, they don't even know what real work is," he would say. I stayed silent, swallowing the words that could reveal everything. With every meeting, he seemed closer, though I still kept my true story to myself. I didn't want him to know who I really was. I liked being just Anna, without the burden of wealth, without expectations, without my protective masks. We had been dating for a few weeks. And every time he touched my hand, I thought, this is it, simple, pure love that has nothing to do with money. I had no idea how wrong I was. At first, everything seemed perfect. Sam was caring, attentive, constantly texting, calling, asking about my day. We laughed until night, shared silly things, and I caught myself thinking I hadn't felt this carefree in a long time. But eventually, something else began to appear in his words, different. Not sharply, not directly, like tiny pins wrapped in a smile. One time, when I wore a simple gray dress and tied my hair in a ponytail, he said, "You could look more stylish if you put in a little effort. You're beautiful, just, well, too modest." I smiled to hide how much it stung. Another time, he said he was planning a dinner with his college friends, and I, without thinking, offered to join. He was awkward. "You know, they're a bit different. It's a specific crowd. You won't be offended if I go alone? I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable." Uncomfortable? I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, they're the type who constantly discuss brands, careers, contacts. You're just a simple girl without all that stuff. And that's cool, honestly. But you're just not in their circle." Not in their circle. Those words cut deep, like a blade. He didn't even notice how much it hurt me. He kept talking, smiling, hugging me. I tried to convince myself that he didn't mean anything bad, that it was just an awkward phrase said without malice. But every time he went to meet his friends, and I stayed home, something cold and heavy would clench in my chest. One evening, he came back late, smelling of expensive cologne I hadn't given him. I asked if they had a good time. "Yeah, great. I didn't want you to feel out of place. They have their topics, their habits. Don't worry, I'll introduce you someday." I just nodded. And inside, I felt an invisible wall growing between us with every such conversation. He seemed to be creating two worlds, one where I was simple, calm, warm, and another one where his people were his level, where, apparently, there was no place for me. I wanted to scream, "If only you knew who I really am." But I held back. Because that was exactly what I had been afraid of from the beginning, to be loved not for my last name, not for my money. I stayed silent. Even when I heard him calling someone and saying, "No, she's a decent girl. Simple. Not one of ours, but sweet. I'm just taking a break from all those fancy types." I was sitting in the living room then, clutching a cup of cold coffee. And for the first time, I thought that perhaps the simplicity he valued so much meant not authenticity to him, but inferiority. It happened by chance. Or maybe fate just decided it was time to put everything in its place. That evening, I had a meeting with an old acquaintance, a manager from a PR company I had once helped find a job. She suggested dinner at a new trendy restaurant downtown. I hesitated, afraid someone might recognize me, but I agreed anyway. We sat at a table near the panoramic window, and for the first time in a long time, I felt how good it was to be myself again, confident, refined, calm. I was wearing a black dress, with a slight wave in my hair, no excessive jewelry. Simply elegant. And that's when I saw him. Sam. He was sitting a few tables away from me, in the company of 3 men and 2 women. He was laughing loudly, gesticulating, ordering expensive wine. I froze. My heart tightened. He didn't notice me right away, but when our eyes met, a flash of panic briefly crossed his. I raised my glass and gave a slight smile. He looked away. And a minute later, I heard his voice loud, boastful. "Oh, see that girl by the window? That's my neighbor. She's a little strange. She's always hitting on me, bringing flowers, inviting me for coffee. She's cute, but, well, you know." Laughter at the table. That same, contemptuous laughter people use to elevate themselves by belittling someone else. I sat motionless. Everything inside me was screaming. I wanted to stand up, walk over, and throw the truth in his face. "I am not your neighbor, Sam. I am the one who owns this restaurant and half the block around it." But I didn't. I just smiled, calmly, evenly, coldly. I called the waiter and whispered a few words to him. He nodded and discreetly went to the bar. My friend, not understanding anything, leaned closer. "Anna, are you okay?" "Perfectly," I replied. "There's going to be a small show now." We finished dinner, and I left the restaurant. Out on the street, with the wind blowing through my hair, I took a deep breath. A few minutes later, I imagined the look on his face when the waiter brought him the bill. For $2,300. At the bottom, a note. With best wishes. Your neighbor. Then, perhaps, he realized that the ordinary girl had a little more capability than he imagined. I didn't feel anger, only calmness. That same cold, refined calmness that comes when you finally stop trying to prove your worth to someone who never saw it. A few minutes after I left, the waiter approached their table. "Excuse me, sir, here is your bill," he said with a subtle smile. Sam, leaning back smugly in his chair, glanced at the folder. And in the same second, his face went pale. "What is this amount?" he mumbled, as if not believing his eyes. His friends leaned in to look. $2, 300. The waiter, with an impassive expression, replied, "The bill has already been paid. Miss Anna asked me to pass on that it's from her. Your neighbor." There was a few seconds of silence. Then laughter erupted. One of his friends slapped him on the shoulder. "Seriously? Your neighbor just paid for all of our dinner? Looks like she's not so simple, huh?" Another girl raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you didn't tell us something, Sam?" He tried to say something, but the words caught in his throat. All those moments when he played the role of the successful guy dissolved instantly. He sat there, blushing, while his friends whispered and gave him sideways glances. That evening, I was already home. I turned on music, took off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and just sat by the window. It was raining outside, and I watched the drops slowly run down the glass. Inside, silence. But not the one from loneliness, but the one from relief. I imagined his face when he realized that the ordinary girl wasn't ordinary at all. That every phrase he spoke about levels and circles now sounded like a cheap joke. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt that I had regained control. Not with a shout, not with a fight, not with tears, but with calmness. A silent retribution that hits more accurately than any words. The next day, I woke up at 7 as usual. Drank coffee, put on my favorite white shirt, and drove to the office. Yes, to the office, the main building of the Stanton Group, which I hadn't visited for several months. When I walked into my office, the secretary smiled. "Miss Stanton, it's nice to see you again. By the way, the restaurant chain is publishing a thank you post today for your visit yesterday. They tagged you in their stories." I paused for a second. A thank you post. That means he will definitely see it. And I didn't even try to suppress my smile. The next morning, my phone vibrated constantly. Messages poured in one after another from Instagram, LinkedIn, even from old acquaintances I hadn't seen in years. I opened the feed and saw the post from the restaurant. "Yesterday, our establishment had the honor of hosting Ms. Anna Stanton, the owner of the Stanton Group chain and our company's main investor. Thank you for your visit and trust." The caption was from the restaurant's official page, and another tag at Anna Stanton Official. I just sipped my coffee and quietly laughed. Because at that very moment, in another part of the city, Sam was sitting on the couch with his phone in his hand, looking at the same post. I imagined him rereading the text over and over, his eyes widening, his fingers clenching the screen. And the scenes flashing in his head one after another. My ordinary apartment, the simple dress, the cheap coffee shops. And his voice, "You're not in their circle." Now he definitely understood exactly whose circle I was in. An hour later, I received a message from him. "Sam, Anna, is it true? Are you the owner of the Stanton Group? I didn't know anything. You should have told me. We could have." "I don't know, just explained everything." I didn't reply. The phone rang. And again. And again. Finally, a short voicemail. "Anna, please. I didn't mean to offend you. I just didn't understand. I was an idiot. You are not who I thought you were. I ruined everything." I listened and was surprised at how sincere a person can sound when they finally lose what they neglected. That same day, I had a meeting with the team. When I was leaving the office, I noticed a familiar face at the entrance. Sam was standing there, holding a bouquet of white roses and looking like a man who hadn't slept all night. "Anna, please, I understand everything," he began as I approached. "I had no right to talk like that. I didn't think that I could be something more than your neighbor." I calmly interrupted. He looked down. "I just got scared. I always felt you were different, but when I saw who you really are, I realized that I myself am worth nothing. His voice trembled, and I felt quiet inside. No anger. No pity. Only clarity. You know, Sam, you kept saying that I was too simple for your circle. And now, it seems, you've realized that your circle isn't mine. And maybe it never was. I took one rose from the bouquet, twirled it in my hands, and put it back. You said you wanted a real girl. Here she is, in front of you. Just not for you. And I walked away without even looking back. His voice still echoed behind me. Anna, please, give me a chance. But I didn't stop again. Because when you've been humiliated once for who you are, a second chance only means returning to the same humiliation. After that meeting near my office, Sam disappeared. Silence for about 5 days. No calls, no messages, nothing. And I thought it was over. But then his attempts to return began, pathetic, obsessive, lacking dignity. First, he sent me a card with flowers. You were an inspiration to me. I never wanted to offend you. Then, a box of chocolates with a note. I'm ashamed. I haven't slept at night thinking about what an idiot I am. And even the funniest thing, a bouquet of roses delivered to the office reception with the inscription, "From your neighbor who wants to regain trust." My employees could barely contain their laughter when they saw it. I just asked security not to accept any more gifts from Sam. But the real blow was waiting for him. His lies began to crumble, a chain reaction. His friends, with whom he was sitting at the restaurant, told others how he embarrassed himself in front of the owner of the establishment. Jokes started circulating on social media about the guy who called his girlfriend a neighbor, and she turned out to be a millionaire. His name, even without his last name, became a meme in local public groups. He lost his job at the gym because the owner, seeing the scandal, said he didn't want that kind of attention to the brand. And me? I just lived on. Calmly, steadily, without drama. One day, I was coming home from work, and he was standing near my house. In a worn jacket with a tired face. Anna, I'm not the same person I was. I realized I lost the most valuable thing. I can't sleep without thinking about you. I looked at him and felt only cold pity. Sam, you didn't lose me. You lost the chance to become a person worthy of respect. And believe me, that's much more painful. He lowered his gaze. I just want you to know. I'm ashamed. And I apologize. For everything. I already forgave you, I said quietly. But that doesn't mean I forgot. He stood like a shadow as I opened the door. And before going inside, I added, you called me too ordinary. But you know what's truly ordinary? Betrayal. Lies. Fear. And that's what you are made of. I closed the door this time forever. Since then, he has tried to contact me many times. He wrote in direct messages, sent voicemails, even stood outside the office when it was raining. But now, nothing remains between us except for that look, when he stood in the rain, holding a bouquet, and I simply walked past. He once said I was too simple, and now I had become unreachable for him.